Hello everyone and welcome back to Let's 100% Metroid Fusion. In the last part we tackled Sector 3, finishing off our stuff in the process while also entering Sector 6. And these are the B.O.X we were told about last part. As I mentioned then, do not touch them. They do, I forget the exact amount, I believe it's around 60 damage though, but we'll find out in this room because I remember I get hit by one in here somewhere. You can stun them with your beam and I think even missiles, which you're supposed to use in order to position them to the point where you cannot get hit by them like that. But some of them are just too numerous to not get hit by. Yeah, that was 69 damage. Ow. So let's see, with my amount of energy tanks at 7, I can get hit by about 14, 15 of these things before I die. They do an absurd amount of damage. Thankfully, if you know the game well enough, you know you can just actually rush to this upcoming area, because in this next room, there's an energy tank. That they deliberately put that in your way so you can make sure you didn't take too much damage. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, you can actually see that there's a very suspicious passageway you can easily see there. And that leads over to here, which... bland-looking hallway. We can't get past that. Those are power bombs. We don't have those yet. So how are we supposed to get past that? Oh, no. Hi. How are you? You have power bombs, right? Do you think you could be so kind as to get rid of that for me? Ow. Thank you. Do not go up there. I know that sounds obvious, but do not. Because while you can escape the SAX fairly easily in the upcoming area, at our health level, it's still, I'd say, a bit too risky to even attempt encountering him. Do not go down there until you hear the music of the SAX fade away. Also, if you want to avoid getting hit by the power bomb that the SAX lays, just head left. All the way to the left in the Morphall passageway, there is a point where you are safe. Barely, but you are safe, if I recall. But yeah, that scared the shit out of me when I first played this. The SAX cannot go through Morph Ball tunnels, so that's why you can technically outrun the SAX there, because it can't come into here. But it's still scary enough to the point where I'd recommend not doing it. Thankfully, one thing you will learn, though, if you do that, is that the SAX, despite being the most threatening thing in the game, has some of the dumbest AI. Very easily you can thwart it, so you don't have to worry too much about that. Also, in case you're wondering what I'm doing, there's actually a Morph Ball tunnel right over here that I frequently miss on my playthroughs, because this is just not a missile tank that's worth going for in my eyes. Because at this point, I think at this point in this playthrough, actually, I have almost the exact amount of missiles I end the game with usually. So I'm usually fine on missiles for the most part. Either way, if you take a look at the map, we're actually very close to the data room. It's about 2 rooms to the east of us. So thankfully, we don't have to worry about these B.O.X for much longer, because we'll have a way to deal with them. But that 69 damage still really hurts. Ow. There's one room I didn't go into where there's like 8 of them in a row, and it ends in an energy tank, but it's not worth going after until after we get the Varia suit. Oh boy. Boss door right before the data room. That's not a good sign. Also, the super missile takes those things out in one hit. Let's see what we got. And why? Hey, get off of my Varia suit. Oh, dicks. And destroy the data console. Great. Now this is a boss room no matter what, so let's see what we got here. Whoa, hi. Boss in this area is the Mega Core X. And the Mega Core X is immune to missiles. You have to actually damage this thing using the charge beam and the little slash it generates. But in terms of pattern, you're seeing it right now. The Mega Core X is just a giant Core X. It moves the exact same way. It has a little barrier to shield itself at first, but that goes away pretty easily. So at this point, it just becomes a war of attrition, because it can't do enough damage to really kill me, but I can do enough damage to definitely kill it. I suppose that's not war of attrition, that's more of a Pyrrhic boss. Either way, kind of an oddly easy boss. I never have had trouble with this thing. And after you do enough damage, it just becomes a normal Core X, so it's kind of a pathetic boss fight, really. I mean, I suppose the way they could be looking at it is you may have run into the SAX, and you may have accidentally taken damage from the SAX, so you might be at low health at this point, so they made the boss a bit easier, but it's a bit odd. But for beating it, we get the Varia suit effect from it, which allows us to survive extreme temperatures, either high or low. But this was in the data room, so did the Core X absorb data, and wow, this thing is weirdly colored. Okay, then. But this does lead into a pretty cool effect here. A bit of visual storytelling. The Core X, the Blue X rather, still think we're weak to cold, so they're actively going into us. However, the next time we encounter these things, which for me is going to be in a minute, they will then actively avoid us because they realize that they're no longer effective against us. And I think that's a really cool idea. Also, hold left. I forget to do it there because there's an item up there to the top left. So I have to go back around to get into that room, but... and there's a missile tank. I'm going to be going to get it right now, but you could save yourself some effort by holding left there. But yeah, look. Now they are actively avoiding me. I really like that detail. In fact, if there's anything I can really give Metroid Fusion is that until probably Prime 3, it had the best story in the franchise, but it also, I think, has the best visual storytelling, because this game has a lot of cool little foreshadowing effects if you're paying close enough attention. Mind you, in terms of storytelling overall nowadays, anything can beat Other M. Because as much, I've mentioned this before, but I really do like Other M as a game. But good lord, that story, man. Ugh. Mind you, let's look at the totals here. That's one bad Metroid story for, in terms of storyline-based Metroid games, 2 good ones, and 1 okay one if we're counting Prime 2. Because I don't really count Prime 1 as having much of a story. But it technically does have a narrative, doesn't it? So that's kind of tricky. Storylines in games like this aren't that important to me, though, on the whole. At least not for Metroid. Axiom Verge, that game's story was pretty inconsequential for me. Mind you, it handled it very similarly to how Metroid Prime does it, where you've learned most of it just through the logs. And Castlevania games, well, you're not playing a Castlevania game for the storyline now, are you? Well, outside of the 3D ones, I suppose. That's a fake missile. In one of the 3 times I believe the game does this, there is a fake missile tank, and the real one is just behind it. I don't get the point of that, but I find it funny all the same. Either way, with the various suit recovered, we're done here in Sector 6, so let's head back to the navigation room with Adam. This also means that we're allowed to actually enter the high-temperature areas in Sector 3, as well as the entirety of Sector 5. And the SAX, I believe, should you encounter it, can no longer freeze you with its ice beam. I think at that point it'll just try to shoot you with its beam just to kill you naturally that way. No more being treated like a Metroid. Though that does bring up an interesting thing. I mentioned it back in the Metroid 1 playthrough, probably about a week ago at this point. But Metroid was later retconned as a name to also be the Chozo word for warrior. So technically speaking, because we have Metroid within us, we are now Metroid on 2 terms, on the fact that we're now part Metroid ourselves, and Samus herself is a warrior. So that's kind of cool. Either way, what we got next, Adam?
How did that X download the Varia suit data? This doesn't seem to make any sense at all, unless the X have the ability to process data organically. At any rate, you have the Varia suit data. Now you'll be protected from extreme temperatures. More importantly, the SAX will no longer be able to freeze you, so you can escape easier. But you're still too weak. That thing is too much for you. You currently have no way of damaging it. But my simulations indicate that a penetrating weapon like the plasma beam might work. Developing modification data will take HQ some time, though. There's also a chance that you may be able to restore your plasma beam by absorbing a large core X, as you did with the charge beam function. As for restoring ice beam functionality, I doubt it. Your current cellular makeup would reject that addition. Therefore, HQ has developed an ice missile upgrade. This will add a freezing effect to your missiles. It will help. Go to Sector 5 for the download. Is your objective clear?
Crystal.
Now get moving.
Alright, time to access the last of the 6 sectors, which, honestly, I mentioned before that Sector 6 was where I got stuck for a while because of the Blue X almost entirely, because I was taking too much damage and I had too little health. But Sector 5 is much easier in my eyes. In fact, after the first venture into Sector 6, the game stays a pretty standard difficulty. Or stable difficulty, rather. Nothing's ever really too hard. There are a few tense moments here and there, but the hardest that the game has to offer for me is out of the way. And the way, welcome to Sector 5. One of my favorite sectors in design, one of my least favorite in music.
You need to download data for the ice missile upgrade. But, as you might expect, the data room here is secured. Level 3 security hatches are yellow. Release the security lock and download data as usual. And experiment with those new missiles. They'll be helpful. Is your objective clear?
Yep.
You know what to do. Go to it.
I like that to a certain extent. You can actually see Adam grow to understand our capabilities and give us semi-shorter briefings as we continue on in the sectors. Also, that was me checking the checklist as usual, because from Sector 5 onwards, there are a lot less items for you to get individually in every sector in each particular visit. Like, I think while we're here, we get maybe 2 or 3 upgrades total. And because of that, I had to make sure I was constantly checking my checklist from here on, just so I didn't make sure I missed, just so I can make sure I didn't miss anything, rather. Also, that's a nice little glass background. Wonder why that's there. Either way, once we enter this door, I believe is when Sector 5's theme starts, and it's a really atmospheric track. I usually really like ice tracks because they usually have that same kind of chilling effect to them, but not so much in this case. I think this is too atmospheric. I mentioned before that I think, at least I think I did, that Metroid Fusion's soundtrack tried to be a bit more atmospheric than the predecessors. And while that can work, in this case, I think they went a bit too atmospheric. I still think the best blend of atmosphere versus catchy is between Super and Prime. Not Prime 2, though. Prime 2 was outside of the Meridia, or no, Lower Brinstar remix. Just kind of with the soundtrack. I like the Luminoth theme, though. Either way, Sector 5 looks pretty mazy if you just look at the map. I honestly think it's one of the more linear areas, at least in the first playthrough. Later on, it'll be a bit more annoying, but for right now, it's pretty standard. Can't do anything in this room yet. I was actually thinking ahead a bit here, because this will just loop around to something we can't get past. So if we can't do anything over here, obviously there's something in this room we need to get past. I think you can figure it out pretty easily. And there we go. Also, that weird green thing was making a sound I don't like. I could recommend saving here, but honestly, there's nothing really annoying in this area. Sector 5, I actually fairly often get tripped up between the first and second visit to it, because you follow almost the exact same route. Either way, here's the security room. Security level 3 unlocked, yellow hatch is now active. Not gonna lie though, outside of maybe level 4 hatches, the hatches have always kind of bothered me as a gameplay element. Because they're there to block you off from going to certain areas that you're not supposed to go to yet, either because of gameplay progression and difficulty, or because you don't have a certain power yet. But my methodology of that is, why not just make it so that there's a thing you can't get past until you get a certain power to begin with? One level 4 hatch I'm thinking of in particular, you can't get past, or get to, until you have a power-up from later on in the game. So why not just do that? I mean, I suppose it makes sense in the fact that this is a research station, certain people are going to have more clearances, but it's always been a bit iffy with me. Either way, now that we've unlocked the hatches, getting to the data room is actually one of the simplest ones to get to in the game, because it's a straightforward shot. And in here, we're going to get the ice missiles. There are another upgrade to the missiles. It just freezes enemies now. It will freeze the enemy before it kills them, if I recall, though. So it's similar to the ice beam in other games, or at least Metroid 1, where you'll need to shoot another missile at something to kill it. However, honestly, I like the ice missiles in this game. They're pretty useful. Also, this is me thinking ahead a bit. It's also in here we're going to get our first sight of, hey, the Rippers are back. And they are your main target for ice missiles. One later ability later on in the game aside, I believe nothing can kill these. So they're ice missile baits for you to get stuff. And you want to get stuff because in here is some pretty good stuff. Hey, an energy tank, sweet. Oh, you fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. That is, I think, the only other time in the game they do that. There might be a third one later on, but I find it pointless all the same. Red herrings have always kind of pissed me off like that, especially in a series of unfortunate events back when I read that series. I never finished that series. I think I got as fast as far as the one with the grotto in the title. I forget what that was. But yeah, yeah. But this is a pretty interesting little puzzle room. We have to kill that crab enemy so it forms that sheet enemy so we can jump on it. Kill the crab enemy above us, let its X reform into a Ripper, and then freeze the Ripper to get to the missile tank down in the top right. I actually kind of like gimmicks like that. I just wish this game did it more. I can only recall maybe 3 or 4 times the game does it. Which, in a game with a total of 100 collectibles, 48 missiles, 20 energy tanks, and 32 of something else, it's kind of redundant. Either way, we can now freeze that thing to get out, so let's get on out of here, because we got our ice missiles, the level 3 hatches are unlocked. We are done here, so let's head back to Adam. Oh yeah, here's another one of those little puzzles. Do not collect the X, even though it's not flashing after the second one, because you need to freeze this thing to be able to run on top of it. Admittedly, thinking about stuff like that, doing level design for a game like this has always been kind of interesting for me, because you need to think ahead of what abilities you're going to be programming into a game, just so you can create puzzles players can potentially see earlier on and do later on, you know what I mean? Kind of like the noob bridge in Super Metroid, the first one you can find that leads to, I think, an energy tank right next to the elevator in Lower Brinstar. I think that's where it is. Yeah, that's where it is. What the hell was that? You guys saw that too, right? Okay, yeah, that's there. How you doing? Having a party back there? Just don't come back through here and we'll be fine. On a serious note, though, that did scare the shit out of me when I first saw it. When I first saw it, I actually did not know what it was going to be. I actually thought it was the B.O.X robot that we fought last part. It's not. I'll tell you that for a fact, but that's kind of cool. Also, I'm going after a missile tank right now, but this is another one that's actually faster to get later on. So I actually recommend waiting on this one. Because we come to Sector 5 a total of 3 times in the game. I think it's the most you actually go to any of the specific sectors in the storyline. And that's much easier to get later then than it is now, because you don't have to do the long climb as much. And in here, as you might be able to tell by looking at the map, is an item. And I always forget where it is. I think it's a missile block, but no, it's a bombable block in the top right of the room. I always remember it's in here. I just always forget what item I need to use to get to it. And mine. I believe I could potentially go get the item that's 2 rooms to the left of me if I didn't do that already. But, what the hell? Adam, what's going on? An error in Sector 3? Oh boy. But with that, I'm going to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in Part 6, we'll be talking to Adam to see what the hell's going on in Sector 3, because that does not sound good. See you guys then.